which are the strongest tomes to start with, and which one is best for your build. So in Age of Wonders 4, as you probably know, as you make a faction, you can choose one tome to start the game with. Now, that tome will have one spell from it automatically researched, and you will get its affinity put into your faction automatically, enabling you to use that affinity for the longest of any tome in the game. So which tome you start the game with is very, very, very important. So as with all my videos where I go over this stuff, when I say tier list, a lot of you guys are more prone to clicking videos with tier lists. So it will be a tier list going over these, but the most important thing is with all my Age of Wonders content, the most important thing, of course, is going to be the discussion piece where we go over the tomes, because in a lot of ways, I mean, obviously, as with everything in Age of Wonders 4, some of these tomes are quite good for certain builds, and some of these tomes are good generally in every build, and some of these tomes are really only going to work in very specific builds, so you kind of need to pay attention to that. And with everything in Age of Wonders 4, you also need to remember that you can always go with a diverse build. You don't need to play like the toppest top things. You can kind of screw around, and so long as your build is fine, so long as it makes sense and isn't just wacky stuff thrown together for absolutely no reason, you'll probably do okay. And especially if you're playing single player, you don't really need to worry that much about playing the meta. I just say that because I don't want me talking about tier lists to kind of contribute towards an environment where everyone just only wants to play the best things, right? Like, you know, have fun with it, right? So as with all my Age of Wonders 4 videos as well, we will be taking the time to go over this, so you can use this as a podcast, you can put this on your second monitor, you can listen along if you want. I'll try to make it as interesting as I can as you guys watch along, but for the most part, this is mostly going to be a discussion video, which I think is what Age of Wonders 4 people like, and of course is what I like to go over. Now, in my previous video, that was about 2 weeks ago, I talked about, I didn't really know what kind of videos to make things on. There was one comment talking about good tomes, suggestions for builds, stuff like that, and that's really how I ended up on this video, where I decided, okay, well, let's talk about the best starting tomes and, you know, how to go into your build and do stuff like that. There was a very upvoted comment, because I did ask you guys to comment and say, you know, what do you guys want to see content on? I think I'm going to try to get out to one Age of Wonders 4 video a week. I was going to do more, obviously, but then the Oblivion Remastered Shadow dropped, and as any of you above 30 know, you know, if Oblivion Remastered Shadow drop, you're helpless, you're powerless, like you gotta go play that for a bit, right? So we're kind of delayed on Age of Wonders 4, but I do want to try to at least get out one video a week. So again, as with the last video, if you guys put down comments, anything like that, like the comments, it was very much liked that people wanted to see builds, a video on builds. I have an idea to go over like 3 of what I would consider the best nature builds, because if you go back and you look at some of my VODs, I tend to play a lot of nature. I kind of like nature late game. It's pretty strong, and I really like doing that. So I'll probably go over some nature build videos. I'll try to get that out as soon as I can. But if you have any other suggestions, of course, you know, put that down. I'll try to go over it, stuff like that. As always, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. And yeah, so let's talk about your first tome choice. How does your first tome choice influence your game? Well, as I mentioned right at the start of the video, you can see that it gives you affinity. Your first tome shockingly gives you affinity, just like any other tome. But your first tome is unique because it starts feeding into your affinity right at the start of the game. That is very important, because if you're trying to get certain unlocks, then it's quite important to get that affinity rolling, which is why one tome that is on the screen right now might be getting a lot of attention from me as I start going over this video. But in addition to the affinity, you get one randomly researched spell from that tome, which I think has a harsh bias towards the summon from the tome. I'd have to look into that more. I don't know the exact coding behind it, but often summons are pretty good. Now, what are you looking for in a tier 1 tome, a starting tome? Let's call it that. Let's not confuse this. I'm not tiering all tier 1 tomes. That's not how this video is going to be. I'm just going to go over best tomes to start the game with, okay? So there will be tomes that I have called quite magnificently powerful in the past that I'm going to be rating lowly because they're not good to start the game with. This is about starting the game, okay? So what are we looking for in a good starting tome? We're looking for a powerful summon so that this can augment our early expansion by allowing us to put mana into summons. Powerful spells, in addition, can be, well, I mean, powerful spells are good, right? But especially if they help our economy or help us set up, this can be quite good. Some other things that are good, let me look here real quick. Where is blue? Some other things that can be quite good here are enchantments. Either minor race transformations are powerful because this helps you out through the entire game. Enchantments for damage are quite effective, quite good. A lot of people like these enchantments because they are... I mean, if you get the damage enchantment on your melee, they do a lot more damage. And these blade enchantments in particular scale quite well. So this would generally be what you want. Obviously, what makes a tome good still makes a tome good as a first choice. But in particular, as a first choice, you really want to be looking out for summons and damage enchantments. If your tome doesn't have some sort of summon or damage enchantment, it's going to have to be a quite very, very, very powerful tome to compensate for that, okay? Now, not every tome with a summon and a damage enchantment is good because of the other things I mentioned. So let's go over then the tier 1 tomes here. I think I'm gonna have to move my camera to the right, aren't I? Yes, I should do that. Is that gonna be good? Tell me if it's not good, everybody. So let's go over the first one. We're gonna go through them all in order here. Tome of Faith. Is Tome of Faith a good first choice? No, for obvious reasons. You all saw this coming. While originally I didn't think Tome of Faith was that bad when I first started making these videos and started running over campaigns, it kind of became obvious that, like, when you start playing the game and you start playing, well, I guess against other people, because I play a lot in multiplayer, right? When you play against other people, when everyone's bad, you can kind of do whatever. But as people get better and better and better, you can't really find space for these tomes that aren't really that great. So Tome of Faith, in my opinion, like when I started playing the game, I was like, oh, this is such a good tome. It does everything good. And then I was like, well, you know what I mean? Every time I thought about it, I was like, I can't really fit this into my build. And Tome of Faith rapidly went down to, I can't really fit this into like any build anymore. So particularly as your first pick, though, I don't think Tome of Faith is any good. I'm going to call this just straight F tier as a first pick. Let's talk about what it doesn't have. We don't have a summon. We don't have a damage enchantment. Now, we do have some powerful spells. I did forget that spells early in the game can be quite good. Scaling of a tier 1 tome can be quite good. That is something I should have mentioned earlier. The ability for a tome to scale is quite powerful. Now, I did mention that kind of with the damage enchantments and minor race transformations. So I guess the last little bit of that is spells. There are powerful spells that can scale throughout the game and remain relevant all the way into the late game. Does Tome of Faith have those? Well, no. Wrath of the Faithful is okay, but not that great. Army Heal is okay. I mean, Covenant isn't bad. Abbey's not bad. The problem is, as we start looking at Tome of Faith, is that this does have some things that if you wanted to go with it, it wouldn't be a terrible tome. Maybe as a second, or even if you went to a third choice and picked a third tier 1 tome, particularly in there's certain builds, maybe you could use it. But as an overall choice, especially as your first tome, there's, in my opinion, absolutely no reason to go with Tome of Faith. Maybe in the future, by the way, with the Empire Affinity rework, I think in the next expansion, they said they were going to do that. So maybe this video will become outdated once, you know, maybe I shouldn't be talking about Affinity that much because in the next expansion, they might rebalance the entire Affinity tree and a lot of the stuff's going to be out of date. But as for now, Order is quite bad. There's basically no reason to go with Order. Other than like very, very niche, very specific builds. And certainly you wouldn't want to get it through Tome of Faith. Now, in the future, if Order Affinity becomes way better and you do want to get it, then yeah, I would think Tome of Faith would be good as a second option. As a first option, absolutely no way. Let's talk about Tome of the Horde. Now, Tome of the Horde, I would call an A-tier tome, despite the fact that it doesn't actually have a lot of the things I just talked about. It does have them, but in its own janky, unique way. Tome of the Horde, it's a very janky tome that does everything I said a tome should do, but does it in like different ways. Does it have a damage enchantment? No, but it has Spawnkin, and Spawnkin gives you % damage increase, 20% damage increase, so it does stack with other damage enchantments pretty well. So Tome of the Horde is a very good way to scale up the damage because it affects any unit. It affects all your battle mages, it affects all your archers, it affects all your melee, shields, pikes, everything, right? So Spawnkin just generically buffs your entire army. This allows you to have a very versatile comp throughout the early game and allows you to scale forever. It of course does have the downside of increased number of units in the formation, and I mean that is a downside, but I would say overall Spawnkin is effectively a damage enchantment, and it doesn't even have an upkeep. It does cost a little bit more mana to cast originally. So if we compare this to, like, let's say Lightning Blades, its original cost is 150 instead of 80. So it'll take a couple more turns, 2 more turns, I think, in the early game to get out on average. But it's not, that's totally fine because you're not going to be paying upkeep for it. And it's 2 more turns, and that does kind of suck that you have 2 more turns without a damage enchantment, but I would say it's overall worth it. I would say Spawnkin is quite good. Now, does it have a summon? No, but it does, actually, yes, it does. It is summon irregulars, which is actually technically stronger than a regular summon the majority of the time, because this will summon a non-scout tier 1 unit that can be produced in a city on target hex. This is a racial unit that you're getting. Now, it will be random between 2 different choices, but because it's a racial unit, and racial units will generally outperform summons, not all the time, but generally, obviously with the trait nerfs to tough and resistant, racial units don't like automatically outscale non-racial units, but I would say overall they're still going to be better. So I would say Summon Irregulars is definitely a very powerful summon as well. So we got Spawnkin, we got Summon Irregulars. Already we've got a tome that's pretty good. Houndmaster is a pretty decent recruit. It's not amazing. You do get a 2-for-1 deal. You do get that Warhound that just summons onto the field automatically. You can use that every battle to just use summon a Warhound. It runs up, it dies. Oh well, next battle you got another dog, right? So Houndmaster is a pretty good unit, but it is tier 2, so like every tier 2 buildable, you're gonna have to weigh, do I want to go with tier 2? Do I just want to fill up with high vet tier 1s and go with that? But Houndmaster of tier 2 units is still pretty good. Did get nerfed right when the game came out, but yeah. Blaze of the Horde is pretty decent. It did get nerfed after the game was launched, but overall I would say Blaze of the Horde is still pretty decent. It can target 1 unit, even with 2 adjacent units. You can slap them with 30 fire damage. That's pretty decent for a tier 1 spell. It's not going to scale amazingly, but whatever. Over here we got Unleash the Warhounds. This is a siege project, which siege projects have become way more important as defenses have become important. Getting 6 extra Warhounds is pretty good for a siege project. I wouldn't call that bad at all. Now, of course, Fury of the Horde, all tier 1 units become 1 strengthened. This is non-scaling, pretty forgettable as well. Mob Camp is also a pretty meh building. It's not really that great either. Now, overall, I would say Tome of the Horde, I did call it A tier, despite the fact it's only A tier for like 1-2 reasons, maybe a third in Blaze of the Horde technically, but I would say the main advantage of Tome of the Horde is that it's a very good scaling tome. Summon Irregulars is a summon that pretty much remains relevant the entire game. Spawnkin allows it to fit into literally any build. Any build can use Spawnkin to do more damage. Now, Chaos Affinity is probably overall, I would say, the worst affinity. But again, this could change in a couple of months, and you know, let's always try to keep these videos relevant and not out of date. For now, Chaos Affinity is pretty bad, but in the future it could be pretty good, especially if it gets, well, I mean, obviously if it gets some buffs it'll be better, right? I don't know why I said it like that. So I would definitely say that Tome of the Horde is like A tier, just because these 2 options are quite unique, quite powerful, and remain relevant forever. Now, Tome of the Evolution recently had a change, and I would call this tome a B tier tome right now. What did Tome of the Evolution have as a change? Draconic Vitality. Draconic Vitality used to be 3 hit points per hero level up to level 5. Now it's up to level 10. So instead of getting 15 on your heroes, you now get 30 hit points on your heroes, which is pretty good. Then you get 5 hit point regeneration per world map turn. That gives your entire army a bit more healing, allowing them to stay in the early game. Now, it is a bit of a what's the right way to put this? It's like a mixed bag, because Draconic Vitality is one of the weirdly goodest, I'm going to call it that, goodest enchantments. It's not even an enchantment, it's a minor race transformation. It's an incredibly powerful early game minor race transformation that massively boosts your entire faction, but it's in a tome that doesn't want to play for racial units, which could be a bit confusing, right? You know, here we got this crazy thing. So Tome of the Evolution, I would say, is probably right now a B tier, just because we got the Slither Hatchling. You do need to produce this in your city, but for an animal unit, and especially I think it is a draconic animal, unless they change it, but this makes it scale with a lot of different things. It's just a very powerful unit, and the Slither at tier 3, when it does evolve, is very, very powerful, allowing you to do crazy tempo plays with the Tome of Evolution. Because if you attack another player with Slithers before they're on tier 3 units, Slithers hit people so hard at range, but are also hitting so hard at melee. They're just a very, very frustrating unit to fight. So I would definitely say Slithers are good. Now the Wyvern Fledgling is okay. They tend to get just annihilated once you're actually fighting in combat. But we are getting a summon here. So we do have a summon. We do have a nice, weird minor race transformation. It's not damage, but it's decent. And then we can kind of start replacing our army over here. Now Youthful Regeneration is actually a weirdly strong spell. If units have Evolve, they get double heal for 36 healing, and they get Resurgence, and they get 2 strengthened. So this is actually a pretty good heal for pretty much all the game until, I would say, the late mid game. Like once you're at like tier 3 tomes, it'll probably get outpaced, but until then, this is a pretty solid spell for battle right there. Now we got the Rapid Evolution enchantment, which is another enchantment. All units that evolve get more experience and slip away, allowing them to stay alive much more consistently to actually get that evolution. So I would say Tome of Evolution, if you're going with the dragon build, which is significantly better these days, is quite powerful. If you're going with an animal build, it has some synergy with animal builds. Definitely has some synergy. You can definitely do some things with that. There's definitely some things you can do. It's a bit complicated, but yeah. So Tome of Evolution I'll call like B tier. If it had a little bit more synergy or maybe a building, I would call it above B tier, but for now, it's a decent choice if you're doing a very specific build. But you have to remember, if even in a dragon build, if Tome of Evolution is B tier, it's kind of like, I would call it like a middling tome that just scales and synergizes pretty well with specific builds. But again, if you're doing a dragon build, then Rapid Evolution Enchantment is pretty good. Now, Tome of Enchantment, this is one that I've struggled on. I call it B tier, but honestly, I should move this down to C tier. I would say it's more of like a C tier tome. It's difficult to say, really, right? Now, what is the problem with Tome of Enchantment? We're buffing Spell-Tempered Shields. This is a buff on the weakest unit type in the game, shield units, so that's no good. We've got Sundering Blades, which doesn't affect ranged units. It should probably just be called Sundering Martial, Sundering Hits or something, I don't really know, but this gives base melee attacks of enchanted units a chance to apply sundered defense. So that's pretty good. The problem with Tome of Enchantment, in my opinion, is that Sundering Blades does fall off as we start getting later and later in the game. It's still good, but it starts falling off maybe a little bit compared to damage enchantments, and it doesn't affect more than only melee. So it's hard to fit this into many builds other than a pure melee build where you're going to end up with many better choices, aka, well, I mean, we'll see later, Tome of Zeal, right? Now, Summon Copper Golem is fine. It's not bad. Copper Golem does have an evolution, but I would say overall I'm just really not that amazed with it. I think Copper Golem should probably go to 70 HP. But he is a summon, he is a spear unit, he has decent damage. He's just kind of squishy. I wish it would push him to 70 HP. Then you got Purging Arrows. Purging Arrows is for range units and skirmishers, and of course, you're already kind of seeing the issue here, aren't you? All these things are, yeah, they're okay, I guess. They're good, kind of, but you're not really wowed by anything here, are you? Purging Arrows gives your physical ranged attacks of enchanted units, but only ranged and skirmishers, so not even battle mages. I think this one should be renamed to Purging Projectiles and affect battle mages and support units. And I think Sundering Blades should be renamed to just Sundering Physical or something. I'm sure a developer can come up with a better name than I do. At any rate, I think this should also allow ranged units to sunder, because I think the theme overall for Materium Tomes should be to affect multiple different types of units. That's kind of a theme that they've got going on, but some of these older tomes that haven't been adjusted much are still a bit overly specific. As for Spell-Tempered Shields, shield units are just not very good right now. Even Bastions aren't good. Maybe this tome would be better if Bastions got buffs, but for now it's not really wowing me. As a Rune Carver's Camp, it's a quarry that gives draft, which is decent, I guess. Draft can be difficult to get later in the game, but overall, we're finishing up on Awakened Tools, 20 production, 20 draft, 10 city stability. Once again, we're running into the exact issue. I think I mentioned this last time I did a tome video. We're just looking at Tome of Zeal, but worse. I don't know a better way to phrase this. Okay, Tome of Evocation. Now, Tome of Evocation is like A tier, but I would say that it's definitely better than Tome of Horde. Tome of Horde is like A tier because it fits in a lot of builds that just need more damage. Tome of Evocation pretty much fits into every build because it's just that good. Tome of Evocation is absolutely insane. The only reason it's not S tier, in my opinion, is because there's 2 tomes in S tier that are just better than it. If those tomes were like nerfed or something, I think Tome of Evocation would just like, bloop, it'd be right into S tier. But for now, if I'm like comparing tomes against each other, it's just weaker, right? And maybe I shouldn't tier things comparatively, like if, but you know, at the end of the day, like things are comparative, right? Yeah. As for now, I think my S tiers are pretty much tomes that are too good. Definitely too good. Evocation should maybe be an S tier then, because I definitely think Evocation should get a little bit of a hit. In fact, when I'm really looking at it, maybe Horde should go down a tier. But at any rate, Horde, it's hard to rank Horde because it just works in a lot of builds. But let's talk about Evocation now. Okay. So what does Tome of Evocation do that's absolutely nutty? Is it the channeling tower? No, I mean, it's a conduit that gives more mana. No one cares. No one cares. Is it the evoker? It's a tier 2 battle mage unit with 55 HP. Once again, nobody cares. So what does it do that's doing so good? If it's not this, it's not... Okay, well, obviously, we got lightning focus that fits in battle mages and supports, giving them 2 lightning damage, which is actually kind of weird, because for a lot of these range damage buffs, they're only +1 damage overall. They'll give like +2, -1, but then the battle mage one is just +2 and electrified, right? I think that's probably because devs are a bit afraid of range units power creeping too much, but it's just something to bear in mind. Tome of Evocation just gives huge buffs to battle mages. If you're not doing a battle mage build, we have lightning blades. Now, lightning blades synergizes outrageously good with Stormbringers later on. If you're going Stormbringers, you're obviously going to go lightning blades. And if you have lightning blades, then Stormbringers are a really good choice. Now, it might be a bit unfair, you might say, to say that this tome is better because you can go Stormbringers, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's just kind of the reality of the situation. Lightning Blade synergizes really good with Stormbringers, so there's an obvious path right here. Evocation, Stormbringers, boom. But even if you're not going Stormbringers, Lightning Blades is just legitimately good because electrifying enemies is not that hard to do. Because we do have things like Fulmination, which is a good combat spell, AoE lightning damage and electrify, 60% chance, which of course then synergizes with the lightning blades. Pretty good. For early game, you can fulminate like every turn in the early game. It's just very effective at that. We got the Summon Lesser Storm Spirit. Now this is probably not the most useful spirit. If you are applying things like Mystic, Mystic Summoning, you can force evolve these. The evolved storm spirits can be really brutal and difficult to fight, but the regular storm spirits, like at 45 HP, they can die not exactly the most difficultly, right? Like they tend to die a lot, especially in early game battles. But we do get a summon, we do get a damage buff, one of the best damage buffs. We do get a pretty good early combat spell, and lastly we have Lightning Torrent. Lightning Torrent is absolutely nuts. This is a spell, a world map spell, that literally never falls off the entire game. It is a top tier spell early in the game, it's a top tier spell at tier 5 tomes late in the game. It is nuts. So this is all units and target armies summon 20 lightning damage and suffer -3 lightning resist for 1 world map turn, but that is a non-cleansable debuff if you choose to fight your enemies. So every enemy you fight with the Tome of Evocation, that army will have -3 lightning resist if you're deciding to use Lightning Torrent, which is very powerful, because you just saw here we got lightning damage, lightning damage, lightning damage, lightning damage, and now a way to debuff their lightning resist. Tome of Evocation is probably where old tomes should aspire to be, because it just feels really good. It's probably maybe obviously I think Lightning Torrent should maybe be nerfed. It should probably just lose the damage outright and keep the negative lightning resist. That would probably be a bit more fair, or maybe have the negative lightning resist like moved so it's only lasts like 3 turns in combat, or I don't really know. But at any rate, I think more tomes should feel good like this, but this one's probably definitely overpowered on its own, right? So Tome of Evocation, just absolutely nutty. Now Tome of Necromancy is a bit hard to rank, because for certain builds you really want to go at first, but I would argue for most builds you're going to want to go this second. Going Necromancy first does have some tricks you can do, some synergy, but overall going it first will leave you in a very weak position. So what does Tome of Necromancy do for us? Now first off, we do get a research building, which is good. The research building, it gives us souls. This is a lot of synergy with the research stacking that's just kind of meta right now, but it doesn't give anything else. We just get souls, right? It enables soul harvest by default, so we can start generating souls from battle, which is pretty much its saving grace right here. Now as for the rest of this, it's Soul collection, we're losing 30 gold upkeep to generate 10 souls, which is, I'm gonna say, probably not worth it. We have necrotic magic, which allows our battle mages and support units to have a 60% chance of applying decaying, which is okay. It doesn't give any damage, just decaying, but decaying is a very powerful debuff, so I mean, yeah. Necrotize, target enemy unit becomes decaying, and when it dies becomes a decaying zombie and suffers 10 frost and 10 blight damage. This is a pretty good spell, especially early in the game. It can win battles on its own. It's just really, really, really good. It starts falling off, obviously, maybe into the mid-game, but in these early game fights, it's a pretty powerful spell right here. We have the Necromancer, who's also a unit. He's a bit weird because he takes souls to build, so you really don't want to use him because you don't want to be using your souls that are very powerful on a unit like the Necromancer. Not really sure what to say about him. Yeah, maybe if he didn't cost so many souls, he would be a bit better. He is pretty good for the Raise Undead, so if you have maybe 2 or 3 in your army, it's fine. But a lot of times, it's better to save your souls for more important things to do. Then, of course, we have Rotting Explosion, which is decent. Target friendly zombie or skeleton explodes. All enemy units in a 2x radius have a high chance of decaying and have a 20 damage taken. It's okay. Once again, it's okay. It's pretty good in the early game. It does use souls though, which is its huge issue. Yeah, losing 15 souls to cast this is not really tenable. You can't really do that very often. Now, of course, the powerful aspect of this tome is if you kill your city-state right at the start of the game and you have their hero in your crypt, you can then revive that hero with Soul Harvest, which allows them to be a Whiteborn automatically. Once they're a Whiteborn, that means they get the lifesteal effect automatically, and it means if you do have any necromancers, you can revive that hero, making them quite difficult and hard to remove. So Soul Harvest does have some good uses for an early game strategy. It does have some good things you can do with it, but overall, I'm just going to say Tome of Necromancy is like a C tier starting tome. It does lead into some good builds, but I can't really argue that going it first is a great idea. Second, sure. First, Tome of Warding. Tome of Warding, I'd call this a B tier starting tome. It's one of the underdogs. It doesn't really look like it should be a good starting tome, and yet it does a lot of things that are quite powerful in the early game. First off, we have Summon Phantasm Warrior, which I would argue, and I think most people would agree with me, is just straight up the #1 best early game summon, period. He's just outright the best. What makes him so good, you might be wondering. So he only does 10 damage, which isn't great. I don't want to go summon his unit sheet. I know it all off the top of my head. He only does 10 damage, which isn't great, but 4 of that is lightning damage, which does make him bypass a lot of defense, which does include shields. If him and another shield unit are bashing on each other's shields, then he's going to have an advantage because he does lightning damage. Now, of course, he does have -4 spirit resist, I do believe, something like that. So he does have some weakness to spirit damage, but that was changed from lightning weakness to spirit weakness. Spirit's a bit harder to find in the early game, especially if you're not fighting other empires. So Phantasm Warrior basically lost his weakness. He's just really good. Now, the very, very unique thing about Phantasm Warrior is he does count as a racial unit. He's a racial summon. I believe this does make him count as a magic origin racial unit, which is pretty rare, not exactly a common thing, which just makes him very, 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 very unique. Like, I think actually just straight unique by the definition of the word. I don't think anything else does that. So Summon Phantasm Warrior is already good and kind of carries this entire tome on his back, but you also have Magical Wards, a minor race transformation that gives your entire race 2 lightning resist, 2 fire resist, 2 frost resist. Now, this is a very, very, very good transformation. Most people are going to get some sort of this damage into their army, and this is for a large part going to be most magic damage. So I'd call this against most armies 2 resistance, which as a minor race transformation is quite powerful to get in the early game. So Magical Wards is most of the time quite powerful. You can fight some armies that don't do that type of damage, but it's not going to be that common. Then we get Staves of Warding, which makes every support ability of support units give +2 bolstered resist. It's pretty decent on its own, but it really starts to synergize with certain support units that can do lots of different effects. For example, if you have the Oathsworn and they do the AoE heal, that's +2 bolstered resist AoE. If you have units that affect more units or free actions, you can apply lots and lots and lots of bolstered resist. which, especially as you get into tier 4 and maybe you get Staves of Grace from the Tome of Paradise, Staves of Warding can kind of just double up here and make support units pretty much good enough to continue to use way later into the game. Static Shield is fine. It does have a huge downside. Target friendly unit gains a shield that has a base 60% chance of inflicting stun on attacker. Now, it's really good on its base level. The only problem I would say with Static Shield is you're using a lot of mana to not actually get anything on your turn. Now, you can try to attack enemy units, provoke a response, and then stun them in reply. That is probably the ideal way to use this. Other than that, it's just with like a shield unit that you run up and you try to, I don't know, tank with. It's not bad, but yeah. Mark of Invulnerability is probably the better one because this scales throughout the entire game. It gives a friendly unit invulnerability for 1 turn and a full cleanse on every single debuff on them, which is pretty good. Now, you can only use it on a unit once per battle. You can't go infinite Mark of Invulnerability, but it's pretty much until late game. Like, even at late game, this is always a useful spell to have in your arsenal because full cleansing a unit and removing removing all those debuffs and making them invulnerable, quite powerful. If an enemy rushed to stun your hero, your lord, and maybe got them down to low HP, you just boop, mark invulnerability, and now for the entire next turn they can't do anything to you, and you removed all the CC and you removed all the debuffs, and it's just quite good. So Tome of Warding, I would say, has good scaling, good early game. Now, it doesn't give you any damage, but the amount of utility it gives you is pretty powerful. Tome of Zeal, of course, is the S tier tome that we like talking about. Why is Tome of Zeal so good? Now, when I did do my video talking about order tomes, what makes Tome of Zeal so outrageously good for first picking is that it just does basically everything. Let's talk about it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, though, because we probably know what makes it so good. So, Condemnation is a very low-cost spell. For a mere 5 mana, it does 15 damage and condemns enemies. Condemned enemies have negative status resist, which cannot be cleansed. And then if your units have Zeal, that Zeal is doubled against condemned enemies. So, Condemnation is actually quite effective in the early game battles for picking out enemies that your army focus fires, which of course brings us to Legion of Zeal. This affects all melee units and ranged units, which gives them +2 spirit damage. Now, that's other enchantments are +4, -2 physical, which is overall better. This is just +2 spirit damage, which you could argue is better or worse, really depends. Obviously, I think magic damage is better than physical damage, but the big thing is because it affects more types of units, and importantly, is doubled against condemned enemies, which will have more and more synergy as the game goes on. This allows these types of units to scale really good. So Tome of Zeal just scales pretty good throughout the game. We have Summoned Zealot, which is a summoned unit. I do not believe it counts as magic origin, but it is a racial tier 1 fighter. Now, it does 13 base damage and already has Zeal by default, so you can't stack Legion of Zeal onto Summoned Zealot. He will, of course, deal 13 damage no matter what. Even if you enchant him, he's going to still be at 13. But if you get him early and you spam him before Legion of Zeal, he is a very, very, very high damage fighter who will absolutely chew through the enemy lines and just do pretty good. So we got a very powerful summon right here. Inspiring Chant is weirdly good and pretty much scales throughout the entire game. Gives all friendly units in a 2x radius 10 morale and 2 strengthened. Then later in the game, of course, once you get those orbs, the matrixes or whatever they're called in your throne city that buff your spells to do more, Inspiring Chant, because it affects all units in a 2x radius, which is pretty big, giving them morale and strengthened. And then Fortune later on, it just becomes a very powerful way to buff your army up in the start of battle. So I'd say Inspiring Chant does scale pretty much throughout the entire game until maybe like tier 5. And even then you can use it like once per battle pretty effectively. Fanatical Workforce is basically the better version of the Materium Tome. So for 3 cities, target city gains 60 production and loses 20 food. So overall you're getting 40 bonus resources, but food is less useful than production effectively in the early game as well. And in addition to that, you can just use Fanatical Workforce to bulldoze through some early vital buildings if you really need to get to them. So Fanatical Workforce allows you to set up your cities quite effectively, and just you're just bulldozing through the early game and setting up so many cities. Fanatical Workforce is absolutely incredibly powerful. Now, as we have more into scaling, we have Circular Zealotry. Plus 10 draft per positive or negative level of alignment. I think that counts to 3. So we have plus 30 draft, which is pretty good. We get a little bit of city stability too, which is fine. But 30 draft is a lot of draft. As you saw in the Materium Tome, they get a mere 15. So this gets 30 late game, Materium gets 15 late game. So if you need that draft in the late game, Tome of Zeal is better. So Tome of Zeal is better in the early game than the other tomes it competes with. It's better in the late game than these other tomes it competes with. It's better at buffing more different types of units. It's better at giving you a powerful spell all throughout the early to mid to even late game if you need it. Tome of Zeal does everything. It's absolutely incredible. It's an S tier tome. Tome of Roots. Tome of Roots is difficult because it has everything in the making of a very good tome, and yet it is in nature. And because it's in nature, it's less valuable because it gives nature affinity, and because it does an herbalist, and herbalists are just generally not that really good of a building because conduits are just generally not that good. It definitely has some flaws. On paper, Tome of Roots should be like an S tier gigatome. In reality, it just tends to not be. So what does Tome of Roots do that's so good? Of course, you got Blight Blades. 20% more damage against poison and decaying enemies. There's lots of builds that can get lots of poison and decaying, so this is a pretty decent way to get 20% more damage. Not all the time, but pretty often. And then blade enchantments are just good. We got poison arrows, which will allow our range units to inflict poison. It's not amazing poisoned arrows, but it's a pretty decent effect. So between blight blades, poison arrows, pretty good right here. I should mention for Tome of Zeal, by the way, Legion of Zeal gives +2 spirit damage even to range units with no downside, whereas Poison Arrows gives +2 -1. So just keep that in mind. This does allow you to poison, but in pure damage, Tome of Zeal does actually give more pure damage to your archers. Now, Vine Prison, of course, is one of the most powerful spells in the game, particularly for early game. Someone's 5 living vines down, enemies need to run away from the vines, they'll constantly get entrapped in it. It takes away their actions. If enemies are corner camping, especially in the early game to mid game, it's a very good way to remove all their actions on a corner camp so you can just lock them in and destroy them. It's a very, 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 very powerful spell, Vine Prison. So thus far, we have no downside with the tome really, other than Herbalist being weak. But then we get to Healing Roots, which is target friendly unit heals 10 and gets 2 regeneration, which is fine. That's 22 healing on your turn. It's fine. It's not exactly scaling, but if you want scaling spells, you got Vine Prison. So a heal's not too bad. Summon Entwined Thrall is definitely a unit that exists and can be summoned. So we do have a summon. The summon's not great. It's a skirmisher unit. It tries to chuck poison needles at people. It's fine. It's not bad, but I'm not exactly wowed by it. It's not exactly wowing me. I don't know a better way to put it. So Tome of Roots' biggest issue is it's in nature, which nobody really wants. Its other biggest issue is it doesn't really have synergy. For example, as we go to Tome of Pyromancy next, Searing Blades will give you 20% more damage against burning enemies, which is pretty consistently available if you're doing a fire build. On the other hand, Poison and Blight is not something you can really apply just permanently forever, basically without thinking about it. So this is going to have a bit of an issue scaling. If we look into the late game, it's got nothing in the late game other than just the 2 generic damage enchantments, and its unique building is meh. Tome of Pyromancy, unfortunately, I'm also going to call a B tier tome. Why is that? Because despite Searing Blade scaling quite well, and despite it being outrageously good in certain builds like Pyro Templars, Tome of Pyromancy, you definitely do want to go it in a lot of builds, but it's not exactly blowing my mind overall. Unless you're synergizing really well with it, it's kind of just an average enchantment tome. So we got Summon Lesser Magma Spirit. Now this is a battle mage, so it doesn't actually get any of the buffs here, by the way. It's kind of awkward. Your summon doesn't get fire arrows. He doesn't get Searing Blades because he's not... Is he the only one like that, by the way? I think he's the only summon that doesn't actually get buffed by his own tome. No, he doesn't. So Summon Lesser Magma Spirit doesn't actually get buffed by his own tome. Kind of weird, that one. It is still a summon, which is fine, but like it's really weird. He has no buffs for his own tome. We do have Ignite. Target enemy unit takes 25 damage, and the ground is set on fire, and they get burning on them. So this is actually a pretty annoying but pretty effective spell in the early game. You can just light the ground on fire, light enemies on fire, do a good bit of damage. It's good weird area denial. I mean, it's just an early game spell. It's not really meant to be that great, but for early game spells, it's fine. So thus far in Tome of Pyromancy, we just got Searing Blades, Fiery Arrows. Overall, they're, yeah. The Pyromancer unit is pretty decent for a Battle Mage. Doesn't get buffed by its own tome though, again, which is awkward. But the Flame Strike sets all the ground on fire. If you do get some Pyromancers, maybe like 1 or 2 into your armies in the early game, it's pretty good for area denial, pretty good for lighting enemies on damage. Just 2 Pyromancers can end up doing so much damage to the enemy's army by just lighting them all on fire. It's just a very, very decent unit. I'll say it's a very decent unit if you can manage to rush a couple out and take some early game battles. Then that brings us to Immolate. Enemy units suffer 10 fire damage, and then they suffer an additional 15 fire damage if they're already burning. Technically good, I guess, but we don't really have easy access to fire yet, and once we do, they will be much, much better spells. For building here, Ritual Pyre, it's a Forester, no one cares. Overall, Tome of Pyromancy ekes into being a beauty tome just because Searing Blades and Fiery Arrows are pretty good at scaling. That's about it. Realistically, the entire tome is just Searing Blades. It's just because later in the game, it's pretty easy to light people permanently on fire with Pyro Templars, which just makes Searing Blades pretty good. This brings us to Tome of Rock, which is another tome for Materium that in the early game it never seems to do as good as you hope. I think that's the best way to put it. Tome of Rock, it never does as good as you hope it does. Now, it does have all the makings of a good tome. We've got a pretty good building for production over here. We've got a pretty good, potentially the best summon. He's a summon that's also a shield unit, so he just tanks forever. Stone Skin is an option in the early game. I mean, can you make one unit pretty tanky for 5 mana? So that's pretty, decent if you're being proactive. It's got Rock Blast, which can help you burn down enemy tanky units that are trying to just sit in defense mode. Earthkin is an early game minor race transformation that makes you tanky. Mountain Camouflage, Mountain Walk. So on paper, everything here is good. Obsidian Weapons gives 1 physical damage and a chance to bleed to all melee and ranged units. Well, I should say all melee and ranged units classified as ranged, not all ranged units like battle mages. So all melee units plus ranged units. You know what I'm trying to say here. The unit buildable gargoyle it's buildable. Boy, it is an option. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could technically do it. It's not banned. So Tome of Rock is definitely one of the tomes. It doesn't have anything wow. If I'm going for a first tome, you've seen the killer first tomes we've got with like Tome of Zeal. We've got Tome of Evocation. We've got Tome of the Horde. We've got Pyromancy scaling really well. And then we got Tome of Rock, which is also an option. It's C tier. I might even be below C tier. Every time I've tried to do it, I just Tome of Discipline, F tier. Boy, if you're going Tome of Discipline first, you have something. You don't have smarts, but you got something. So Monastery is a conduit, which are terrible in the early game. They boost nothing. We don't need mana. Does it do anything special and good? Herbalist at least does something good, but as Monastery, it's bad. It's just really bad, obviously. I wouldn't be saying this unless it was bad. City Stability, Draft. Now, Draft is kind of good in the early game. City Stability is kind of good in the early game, but realistically, we just don't want a conduit. Inner Mastery. The entire race gets 20% more healing and 1 status resist. Technically decent, maybe as a second tome, but as we will keep going through here, we're going to see how much is going to fall off. Mantra Purification is a heal, but it only removes 2 status effects. So it is a heal cleanse that does not scale that great because into the later game, it won't be a full cleanse. So Mantra Purification should probably be a full cleanse. So it scales better. Maybe, I don't know. It just seems weird to me that like, the entire tome is here for Inner Mastery and Powered Strikes, Focus Aim, Mantra Purification. Mantra Purification is not even a full cleanse. We got Empowered Strike. Every melee unit, except shock units, deal +1 physical damage. Effects are increased for single shot attacks, which would really make me wonder why didn't they just give it to charge units? I know it would only be double the 2 damage and would be pretty shit, but why not just give it to charge units, right? If they do their 3rd attack in a turn, it's a 60% chance to stun enemies. And you might be saying, well, that's why I don't give it to charge units. But, like, just give it to charge units anyway. In my opinion, they could even give it to ranged units. Maybe give it to ranged units, and then instead of ranged units having a chance to stun, ranged units have a chance to slow. That way, like, you see what I'm saying? I just think a lot more enchantments need to affect multiple kinds of units. And once again, we've got another Tome of Discipline, that it's like a Materium Tome that seems like it wants to buff and enforce multiple strategies, but then like the harsh reality is, because these aren't affecting multiple units, it's just not. So then we got Focus Aim, range, battle mage, and support units get the Focus Aim ability, which is a 1 use per battle action, free action that makes them unable to miss until the end of their turn, which can be okay. Overall, none of these do anything. I'm not even going to mention the monk. He definitely doesn't do anything. So it's like the entire tome is inner mastery just for the 20% healing received, which even then I don't think is that good. I just call it F tier. First pick, F tier. Second pick, like D or C tier. It's just not wowing me. Now let's talk about the second S tier Tome of Cryomancy. You've probably heard me talk about this tome. This tome is broken. Like, I could argue Tome of Zeal isn't broken. It's just very, very strong. But Tome of Cryomancy is actually just straight up overpowered with no... It's just actually overpowered. Let's get into why. So first off, we have School of Cryomancy. This is pretty good. 10 knowledge as a research post, just a really good SPI. That's single province improvement, or say special province improvement. The mana per adjacent snow or ice doesn't do that much in the early game unless you started in the Arctic. Then it'll actually give you a pretty decent amount of mana. Don't scoff at that. It's not great, but it's not bad to get a lot of free mana. Later in the game, if you go Tome of the Cold Dark, this will actually give you a lot of free mana. So Tome of Cryomancy does scale a lot, gives you mana for that late game, gives you knowledge for the early game, just pretty solid. Frost Blades is pretty good. Damage against frozen or slowed enemies can synergize pretty well with a certain spell out of a certain Stormbringer tome. So Frost Blades is a second ability that, much like Lightning Blades, can give your Stormbringers a 20 and 20% more damage increase against pretty much everyone on the opposing army. So Frost Blades, pretty good. Frost Arrows gives you a chance of slowing enemies on ranged units, which is pretty decent actually. If you're playing for ranged units, which I don't know why you would, then Frost Arrows is pretty decent. Personal opinion, I think these should be called Frost Projectiles and affect battle mages and supports. I think that would actually be a good change. Definitely nerf Tome of Cryomancy after that, but I think that'd be a good change for opening unit diversity. Let's get to talk why this tome is Giga Mega S tier. Blizzard. Target enemy army suffers 20 frost damage and gets -3 status resist. That -3 status resist cannot be cleansed. So it scales the entire game. Why does that scale so outrageously? Because Tome of Cold Dark has Flash Freeze, which gives all enemy units in the province 20 frost damage and -5 status resist. Now these stack. So of course, Tome of Cryomancy can give them -3. Tome of the Cold Dark at tier 3 can give them -5. That's -8 status resist. That allows you to place debuffs pretty much for free on enemies. It's kind of nuts. The fact that Blizzard and Flash Freeze also do damage is kind of nuts. I would like to see their damage removed entirely. That would probably be good balance. I also think allowing you to cleanse off the debuffs would probably be a pretty good decision as well. Maybe it would make Prosperity Dragons overpowered, but right now there's kind of like no counterplay. It's really bad. Right now, if you fight Cryomancy, Cold Dark, it's very good early game, which I'll continue to get into, and then even in the late game it scales super duper hard. So basically every army needs to have some sort of regeneration or healing global or something, or otherwise they just get whittled down on the world map, and then once they get into the battle they've got -8 status resist. Wowee. So we got Frostblades good, Frost Arrows good, Blizzard good, School of Cryomancy good, White Witch is an option that'll show up, make sure not to click it whenever you're trying to research. Ice Coffin, pretty good option right here. 90% chance of freezing enemies, and if you're unsuccessful, you automatically slow them. So it does cost a bit of mana and combat magic, but it's pretty good. Especially in the early game before people get status resist, this is pretty solid. It's a pretty good effect here. Then we got Summon Lesser Snow Spirit. Now, this unit is really, really, really good. This is a skirmishing unit, so it can chuck those ranged attacks out over and over. Freezing Burst should have a 30% chance to freeze, and if it doesn't freeze, it automatically slows, which is very strong as a skirmishing unit. It does have a 2-turn cooldown, but you get the idea. Now, it does run up and hit people in melee. Decently tanky with 55 HP, at least for a shit summoned spirit unit, right? 55 is not bad. It's no Stone Spirit, but 55 is at least not as bad as like a Magma Elemental, right? So if this does manage to evolve, it becomes the summon, or sorry, I should say the regular Snow Elemental, which is very, very, very strong. So we've got a powerful spell, a powerful summon, a powerful enchantment, one of the best spells in the entire game, an outrageously good building, and an option which dilutes your research pool down. Overall, Tome of Cryomancy just absolutely insane. Tome of the Tentacle, I'm going to call this D tier. I'm going to call this D tier with I'm calling it better than Discipline. Don't take that to mean it's good, but better than Discipline. Why is that? Pretty much just Conjure Tentacle. Conjure Tentacle is a very powerful combat summon that you can put in a battle. It whacks enemies, has a high chance of immobilizing. It's very strong. It's very annoying to fight. Nothing more to say than that. That's basically the only reason this tome gets anything. Other than Conjure Tentacle, what do we have here? Constrictor. Constrictor is a decent tier 2 polearm unit. I would like to see it go to 80 HP so it just scales a little bit better. If Constrictor was 80 HP, it would just do a little bit better. Just like a little bit better. Just like devs just like give it like a little bit of a buff. Like most tier 2 units just need like a little bit of help to be better. Other than that, it pulls people, it's got decent damage, it counts as a polearm unit, so it gets the entire set of polearm buffs. Polearms are probably the best unit type for just getting generic buffs. So I would just say Constrictor is a pretty solid unit, but it could, a little bit of a buff for your devs. Tier 2 units are just not very good. Constrict and Focus gives battle mages and supports a 30% chance to constrict, which is not a very good chance. With certain units, this can be good, but it's only base attacks. So other than, I think, Warlocks, there's no way to AoE this. And Warlocks don't AoE, they just hit 2 targets with their special attack. Retaliating Growths. Target friendly unit gets Retaliating Growths. Do we really need to talk about this? It's good-ish. Now, if you have something like a Warrior Hero or something like that, Retaliating Growths can be very, very strong. You end your turn in defense mode. All your attacks have a 60% chance to constrict enemies. This is on melee attacks, by the way, and you get Scrying Eye, which I think is just, Scrying Eye is not bad. Unit is immune to flanking. Actually, that's not too bad. So you're immune to flanking, you end in defense mode, which I think makes you immune to flanking anyway, and then you get unlimited retaliation attacks and a chance to constrict enemies. It's decent enough. Tendril Labyrinth, you put this in your city, it's okay. When you're besieged, you conjure 3 tentacle units adjacent to enemy units at the start of the battle. So it's just a good siege defense building. It's okay. It's okay. Overall, it's D tier. We have no economic buffs here for our first tome. We have no special province improvement here. We have no summon here. We have no damage enchantment here. We do have sort of kind of maybe a damage enchantment. That's about it. Overall, just a very bleh tome to pick first. Tome of Alchemy, I'm also going to go D tier. Now, Tome of Alchemy is like Giga S tier normally, but as a first pick, well, it's not very good. And that's why I have to begrudgingly rate it as D tier. I do not think Tome of Alchemy is very good as a first pick. If you're trying to do a Giga Mega Research build, you're better off going Tome of Cryomancy first. If you're trying to do a Giga Mega Research build, you're probably better doing anything else first to have a better early game. What does this tome do to help you in the early game? You probably know what Tome of Alchemy does, so I'm not going to bore you by going over it again, right? Let's try to keep this video at about an hour length, right? What does it do? Nothing. What does it do early game? Nothing. How does it help your early game? It's nothing. It's a good tome for scaling, for sure. Just don't pick it first. The other thing you could argue is Anti-Magic Tincture, which could dispel in an AoE early game. That's about it. Fumigation could maybe help you take out your city-state if you're fighting them in the early game, but if you're struggling to take out your city-state, it's likely because you went Tome of Alchemy and aren't buffing yourself in the early game. Overall, yeah, if you're going to go second, Tome of Alchemy second, really good. Third, still really good. Fourth, you might be shocked, still really good. First, no. Tome of Beasts, okay. Now, Tome of Beasts is a bit difficult because we have a bunch of drawbacks with Tome of Beasts, which in the future might be fixed, but for now, obviously, are not fixed. What are those issues? 1, Beasts are not a very good archetype right now. Beasts are just not doing very good at all. Number 2, Nature Affinity is not doing very good overall. Now, when we combo Nature Affinity is not good and Beasts aren't very good, you might understand that Tome of Beasts in Nature already is playing. It's like it comes into this race and it's already down 3 miles. It's got a lot to make up for. And does it make up? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. So we got Wildlife Sanctuary, which is a special province improvement forester, and I'm already bored because it's a forester, and nobody in history has ever wanted a forester other than to boost buildings. Boosting buildings early game, they're okay. After that, you pretty much annihilate the foresters, okay? I'm the Lorax. The forests deserve to live. Gives food and draft per adjacent province with forests. Now that can be effective if we're scaling into late game, so it's not totally useless. You do allow the production of various animal units, which can be good. I'm not saying it's bad, but overall it's a forester. It's not helping us in the early game. So how am I calling this a B tier tome? So a couple things. Number one, we have Summon Wild Animal. Now Summon Wild Animal, its tier 3 tome variant has a chance of summoning tier 4s, which is bad. A tier 3 tome should automatically be summoning tier 4s, but a tier 1 tome automatically summons tier 1s. And then Summon Wild Animal has a chance of summoning tier 2s, which actually ironically means the tier 1 tome is better at summoning at its tier than the tier 3 tome is by a considerable margin. So Summon Wild Animal does summon an animal. Animals aren't very good to begin with, so, you know, we're kind of coming at a downside here. As compared to these other summons, you know, it's the same cost. You are getting a random animal. Animals aren't really that good. They're typically low maintenance units, so you're not really getting the A team of summons here, right? But you do have that chance at a tier 2, so that can do pretty good. Animal Kinship is a minor race transformation. When our race is adjacent to a friendly animal, both units are granted 10% damage and 10% critical hit chance. It's okay. It could probably get a bit of a buff. I do believe it affected cavalry right when the game launched, but then people would just use it on pure cavalry builds, so that cavalry buffed itself. Personal opinion. Could we go back to that? Because, like, I don't think that animal builds are doing so good right now, and maybe if Tome of Beasts could lead into a cavalry build, it would be better. So we do technically have a sort of kind of damage enchantment here, but it's not really that great. We have Marcus Prey. Target enemy unit becomes distracted and gets 3 sundered defense. Shockingly, actually not that bad for how cheap it is, coming in at 5 mana. Marcus Prey is actually a weirdly good spell, because remember, if an enemy is distracted, they get 25% more damage because they are considered flanking attacks automatically. So Marcus Prey, in addition to the 3 sundered, the 25% damage boost, Marcus Prey can actually cause an enemy unit for very, very cheap and low mana to take a lot more damage. Call the Wild, target friendly animal and cavalry unit in a 1 hex radius gets 2 bolstered defense and 2 strengthened. Costs a little bit of mana, doesn't scale that good, is only a 1 hex radius, but again, in the early game at 15 mana, this can be a pretty good power boost to your units. Okay, Wild Speakers, of course, a pretty good support unit, but we're looking at tier 2. Honestly, I'm going to put Tome of Beasts down to C tier. I've talked myself out of it. Tome of Beasts are going down to C tier. Nature is terrible, beasts are terrible, and the tome itself is really not that good anyway. Realistically, the only thing Tome of Beasts has is spamming Summon Wild Animal in the early game to get some pretty decent beast RNG to try to... I don't really know, to try to, I guess, expand and kill people early game. Other than that, what is Tome of Beasts doing? I think if they buffed Animal Kinship to include Cavalry again, it could maybe be janked into a cavalry build, but even then I don't think so. I think if Wildlife Sanctuary was buffed a bit or something, the whole tome is just not doing anything. Like, I notice when I look at this tome, I think, like, okay, so if I got Tome of Zeal, right? So I got that late game draft, I got that early game build up, I got one of the most powerful damage enchantments, I got a powerful spell the entire game. Then I look at Tome of Beasts. Here's a question: what if we made Call of the Wild a 2 hex radius? Now that would scale a bit better and make this tome definitely a bit more tantalizing, right? But at a 1 hex radius, I don't really know. Either way, the tome definitely needs help. I think it's no good. Even if I'm doing a beast build, I don't know why I would go Tome of Beasts, which is kind of sad when you think about it, right? So that's okay, Kitty. Oh my god, Kitty. She's being very loud. So I think it's every tier 1 tome, right? So our obvious winners then and this shouldn't really be a shock to anybody, right? Obvious winners then are, Kitty, I need to zoom in. There we go. Okay, you can come back now. Okay, so obvious winners are Tome of Zeal, Tome of Cryomancy. I think these two are pretty much going to be in every single build if you're trying to play in like a meta way. Every build will start with one of the two of them. You don't have to, obviously, but they are quite good. Horde, I might be overrating a little bit, so do keep that in mind. Horde might be bought down in like the B tier tome, but Horde is quite good because it just buffs so many different types of units. It's just overall quite good. Evocation is just absolutely insane. Evocation as a first or second pickup is just really good. Tome of Evolution. Tome of Evolution is much more buff than it used to be, so I'm giving it a bit of credit here. If you're trying to do a beast build, I actually think Tome of Evolution is better than Tome of Beasts for a beast build, which says something. Tome of Warding, of course, gives you very good defense, very good scaling on your support units, and it gives you one of the best early game summons in the game, if not straight up the best early game summon, so keep that in mind. Tome of Roots is an outrageously good combat spell. It's just being brought down by nature, and Conduit's just really not really being that amazing. It's also harder to proc poison than to proc the effects for the other blades. It is poison and decaying, but overall it's just difficult to do. Tome of Pyromancy is in B tier, probably just because of Pyro Templars. If it wasn't for Pyro Templars, I'd probably have it down there in that B tier, but it is a blade tome, so it's always going to be good because it's got blades. Blades are really good. Tome of Necromancy is just a little bit weak in the early game. The summon skeletons I didn't even bother to talk about because you should never even be using them to begin with. It's very weak. The only reason to do it on a rush is to kill your city state and raise their hero as a white. If you're not doing that, there's no real point to be going Tome of Necromancy. Tome of Rock, Tome of Enchantment. Both these tomes are just inferior to their alternatives from other affinities, so I just don't think they're good. Tome of Beasts, honestly, I might even be overrating it at C tier, but it does have that summon beast spell, which is fine. Tome of Tentacle doesn't really do a lot early game, doesn't really do a lot mid game, doesn't really do a lot ever. Tome of Alchemy just doesn't do anything early game. Like if you're tier 1, just don't, like, sorry, not tier 1. If you are on your first tome, do something other than Alchemy, right? Just don't go Tome of Alchemy rush. Tome of Discipline, Tome of Faith basically do nothing early game. Faith does scale a little bit better, but like it does so little right in the early game. Honestly, Tome of Discipline is probably straight up the worst to get first, but Tome of Faith is also just really bad as well. So keep all of that in mind, right? So as I wrap up this video, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. I don't think I said that at the start of the video on accident, or maybe I did and I'm forgetting, but thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Do give me more ideas on videos to make. I do want to do more Age of Wonders stuff for you guys. And again, we were going to stream some games and do stuff like that, but I'm sure and I hope everybody can acknowledge there's been a lot of releases this month, right? So, but anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, have a great rest of your day.